slides for you. We're going to take a look at a healthy oak forest, an unhealthy oak forest, and define and talk about the overstory and the understory. So what I mean by the overstory, that's the canopy of the forest, the upper level of the trees, the crowns of the trees. And the understory is the ground level, where there's different shrubs and trees growing at that level. So my first slide here, the left-hand photo, I took that photo in Westfield last year during the growing season. And what I like about this photo is the pockets of blue sky amongst the crowns of the trees. This photo was taken during a thinning project. And the result has been that the trees that remain, they now have a light on all sides, or at least multiple sides. So they're also, they have healthy crowns. So with the increase in light, they're able to put on more growth, expand, put out more leaf cover. The photo on the right was taken by Andrew, who you hear from later, in the Montague Sand Plains, which is close to Greenfield. And the photo shows oak sprouts from the stump sprouting. And there's a lot of resources that's left in the stump after the stump and the root layer after a tree is cut down. And with oaks in particular, the resources in the roots and the stump give way to numerous individual stems that sprout. So there's a whole nice layer of oak stump sprouting, and there's some other associated shrubs. So in general, though, a healthy understory is one where there's sufficient light, where native shrubs and trees, hopefully native, hopefully not invasive, trees can regenerate. Next slide, please. And sorry, by regenerate, I mean grow, repopulate, new seedlings and new saplings. So now we're into the unhealthy forest. Unfortunately, the photo on the left is an example of the tremendous gypsy moth damage we've had in the southern tier of Massachusetts and up into the Quabbin Reservoir region. So the trees you see left, right, center, all of those trees are dead or dying, certainly stressed oak stems. And the ones that are alive or barely alive, their ability to produce leaves and engage in photosynthesis is dramatically reduced. So they likely will be impaired if they even survive. So, the legacy of this round of gypsy moth has been multiple years of decay, decline, and death for many of our oak trees, unfortunately. I don't know if you'd call it a silver lining, but you can see some oak regeneration in the foreground of this photo. But personally, I'd rather not have a major destructive event occur in order to get new oaks. But unfortunately, that's what's happening in, like I said, in the southern regions of Massachusetts hit by the gypsy moth outbreak. The photo on the right was taken in New Hampshire by New Hampshire Extension. And yes, there's green in the understory, but unfortunately, that's an invasive plant. That's winged euonymus. The canopy in this photo, there's many stems, there's a full canopy, but the result has been that very little light reaches the forest floor, and invasives have attributes that allow them to outcompete natives. For example, they leaf out sooner in the spring and they lose their leaves later in the fall. So in this case, winged euonymus has outcompeted other native shrubs and trees. So thank you. I'll give way to Andrew.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Rawcliffe. I am also a service forester with Massachusetts DCR. My area of responsibility is generally speaking to North Quabbin, towns like Petersham, Phillipston, Orange, and Athol. And this, I like to talk about sources of oak damage and oak stress. General decline of oak is a combination of biotic factors, meaning factors of fungi and insects, and abiotic factors such as wind events, hurricanes, or as in the left picture here, wind squalls so strong that they snap the tree straight in half. Abiotic factors of oak decline includes unusual weather and extreme events such as this one. Those events could be late spring frosts, unusual spring warming followed by freezing temperatures, droughts, even short acute events, and excessive moisture. So if you have too much water during the springtime. Biotic factors can include gypsy moths, cankers, or any of the leaf diseases that I'm about to mention. When thinking about your oak trees, first thinking about the weather, as that will generally be the first indicator to oak decline, and then the fungi and the insects and gypsy moths will follow to take advantage of a weakened response from the tree. Excuse me. So some hardwood leaf diseases include anthracnose, powdery mildew, leaf spots, leaf blister, leaf blotch, sooty mold. Usually these leaf diseases are economically unimportant in forestry and the landscape, as it is least damaging diseases of the hardwoods in the foliar stage, unless they develop into twig and stem cankers. But the defoliation is psychologically very important to landowners and homeowners because it makes you think, well, your trees are dying. Anthracnose specifically is a foliar disease in which symptoms often follow the leaf veins. The fungus grows down the petiole, and this can become serious if it develops into a canker inside the twig. When it becomes a canker inside the twig, it'll kill the cambium on that branch and it will slowly kill back the canopy of the tree. Anthracnose is generally a transition disease between leaf spot and stem canker, and it occurs during cool, wet weather and generally in the spring. It is endemic, meaning it is not an invasive fungus. So your oak trees have co-evolved with anthracnose, so typically this does not kill the tree. Primarily, this affects flowering dogwood and American sycamore species, but it is also found on oak and typically resembles a frost injury. The only control is to spray it with fungicides, but if you're on a landscape level, that's usually not an option. Another type of stressor for oaks are things called hardwood stem cankers, and they come in two classes, annual and perennial. Annual stem cankers are only active for 1 year, but perennials are active for more than 1 year. The type of canker that affects oak trees is the strumella canker, which is a perennial canker. This canker is considered a target canker because when the bacteria enters the oak through an excuse me, I got way ahead of myself. Logan, can you advance the slide, please? There we go. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. So on the left picture, you're seeing an outbreak of gypsy moth. On the right-hand picture, you're seeing, two-line chestnut borer infecting the tree to the right. You're seeing leaf defoliation on that first picture. And in the center picture, you're seeing what the holes look like when the insects actually get into the tree. Usually it's the insects. It's not the insects, but it's the bacteria that's carried on the insects that carry the diseases. But excuse me, where I was with strumella canker, this is considered a target canker because when the bacteria enters the oak through the existing wounds, such as in this picture, it goes into the tree during the fall where the fungus just hangs out for a little bit. And then the fungus will then start attacking the tree during the winter time by killing the cambium and bark. And then the tree during the springtime will fight back by creating wound wood around the affected area during the spring, and after several years, the wound wood will create rings and it'll make itself resemble a target. By itself, the canker will not kill the tree, but if multiple cankers are formed, then survivability of the tree decreases dramatically. And with that, I'll pass it on to the next presenter. Thank you for listening.
I'm muted now. Thanks, everybody. I'm Jeff Ward. I'm a chief scientist at the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station. And one of the things you can do this weekend, well, before we had the snow, you could have, is do a deer pellet count. It's something you can do once the snow melts. And deer can be a real stressor out in the woods. And anything over 15 deer per square mile is a problem. I'll show you how to do that. For example, you look at the picture in the background here, this actually was an area that had 60 to 100 deer per square mile, really high deer densities. And everything you see green growing in the understory is an invasive plant. There's no native wildflowers, no native regeneration. Next. Well, to figure out how many deer you have per square mile, if you've got a lot of money, and it is kind of fun, I've done it, you can go up in a helicopter and you can do an aerial survey. You can jacklight deer at night and get some estimates there. There's some methods where you can go out and track deer after the snow. That's one of the things you can do. And you can look up, you know, how many days since the last snowfall, how many deer tracks there are, and get an estimate. Next. Or you could do what I'm going to talk about, which is you can go out and do pellet count surveys. Usually don't do them on the snow, although you could do them on the snow with the same technique I'm going to show you for on the leaves. Next. Well, one of the things about deer is they poop anywhere from 19 to 25 times a day. So let's say for the math we're going to do, there's like 20 a day. Next. So there's a lot of deer pellet groups that they're dropping all over. Go ahead, next. And next. So we start with a fresh blanket of leaves in the fall. And generally speaking, you know, the leaves are done falling by about November 1st. So you figure out how many days when you go out and you do your pellet count, has it been since all the leaves fell? And now we have pellet groups on top. Next. So what you want to do is you take your property and you want to put out a systematic grid of points across your property. You want to have at least 10, 20 or more is better. The more points you have, the more accurate your count's going to be. And I should say this is a relative index. It's not going to give you the exact number of deer per square mile. But if it's something you could do, you know, late winter every year, and you can see if the deer density is going up or down on your property. Next. So what you do is you get a rope with a fixed area. So if you want to do a 25th of an acre, you can do the math. It's 23.6 feet. You do a radius, and then you just look right around there. We actually, when we do it, we have a stake. We attach the rope. We pull the rope tight. We walk around the circle, and every time we see a pellet group, we'll actually put down a popsicle stick. Use the orange stakes here so you can see it. Next. So if anyone out there is really geeky, you can look up all this math, go back and read it later, but there's an awful lot for a talk like this. So next. So a simple math, and this is going to give you a pretty close guess. If your rope is between 23 and 27 feet long, then a reasonable approximation of the number of deer you have per square mile is, next. Thank you. 640 times the number of pellet groups you've counted in all your sample points. Divide that by the number of points and divide that by the number of days, and that'll give you the number of deer per square mile. And I got to tell you, one of the things it's actually, I've done this a number of times, it's actually fun to go out and do pellet group counts. Won't get into today, but you can actually, at the same time, with a little bit of practice, you can tell the difference between deer pellets and rabbit pellets, and you can estimate how many rabbits are out there too. Next. And just remember that anything over 15 deer per square mile is a problem. Next.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So we've just introduced you to some quick ideas for things you can watch in your woods, looking at the health of your trees, looking at the understory, looking at the little seedlings and saplings, and also paying attention to things like deer poop that can let you know if you have too many deer, it might be kind of hard to grow all the trees that you want in your oak forest. In our next section, we're going to learn about things that you can talk about with your forester. So Fern is going to start us off.
Good morning. I'm Fern Graves. I work for Rhode Island Division of Forestry and Agriculture, previously known as Division of Forest Environment. So I
Hey,
serve
Fern.
as,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry. Could you lean a little closer to your microphone?
okay. It's been fuzzing in and out, so if it goes out, please let me know again.
Okay,
Is this a
thanks.
good volume?
So far, so good.
Great. So I serve as the coordinator for the forest stewardship program here, and I'm also the state's sole service forester. And you're going to hear these terms service forester and consulting forester a little bit today. And some of you probably already know, but for those that don't, service foresters are public servants who can give you advice and connect you to resources and opportunities. They're often your first point of contact if you have questions or don't know where to start. And consulting foresters are private entities that you might hire to write management plans or mark timber or take inventories and things like that. They can also help you advise you on harvests when you're working with a logger. And these are the foresters that you'll be choosing from when it comes time for you to get a plan. So when you look for a consulting forester, if you're concerned about your land management, you want to work with someone that you click with. So generally, if you put 3 foresters in a forest and you ask them a management question, you'll get 5 different answers. And different foresters have different management styles. And some stick with old school, kind of straight timber management styles, and some are more creative and they're using and exploring new techniques all the time. And none of those approaches are good or bad. You just want one that works with you. Most foresters fall somewhere within that spectrum. And before you start working with a forester, you want to know what you want. You want to outline your goals. And these goals can be anything you want. Just make sure it's what you want. These goals can be really traditional forest products like firewood, timber. They can be wildlife, game species, or non-game species. You can manage for both. You can manage for non-timber forest products. That's becoming really big. That's mushrooms, edible greens, decorative greens. And there's a myriad of other objectives as well, of other goals you can have: water quality protection, climate change, forest health, aesthetics. Some people just like the way it looks, and recreation is really big. And none of these are exclusive of the other. So you can have several different goals, and it's likely that you can manage for all of those things. And when you're thinking about these goals and when you're talking to your forester, you want to make sure that you communicate to your forester the scope of what you can do and what you're willing to do. Some people aren't as willing to do really intensive things, and you need to make sure to communicate with that forester so you can see if your goals are attainable with what you're willing to do. When you are talking to your forester and you give them those goals, that's what you bring to the table. You bring your goals and what you want to do and what you can do. And the forester will bring their science background of forest ecology. So they take an inventory of your land. That includes tree species, wildlife sign, health of the forest, understory, soils. It includes a lot of different things that you're going to see in your plan. And they use their science background, the science of forest ecology, to come up with a plan, a prescription, basically, of what you need to do, getting you from what you have in your forest to where you want to go. So for some of you, what you have might be a degraded condition due to invasive species and defoliation mortality. And then they'll help you get to where you want to go with this prescription that they are going to outline with you in your plan. And the best way to accomplish this during this process is to stay really informed and involved in the process. So you can't just give your forester your goals and they give you a plan and then you say, okay. You can do that, plenty of people do, but the best way to accomplish these things is to stay really engaged and say, well, why? What does this mean? That's usually the most helpful, most successful people stay really informed and engaged. You can go to the next slide, please. So an important part of forest management that often gets overlooked is planning for non-forest aspects of the future. So if you're doing all this work, sometimes for decades, people do this work. And you'll likely want it continued when you're, no longer in charge of the management, if you give it to a family member or if you move away and sell it. So you want to have sort of a contingency plan or a plan. And the best thing you can do right now is to start involving your family as much as possible and as soon as possible. So if you've got young kids, for example, that's the perfect place to start. Research shows that appreciation for the outdoors really starts in childhood and with exposure to the outdoors as a child. But it's never too late. So if you don't have young kids, that's okay too. The majority of private landowners are over 60 years old. Many of them are much older than that. They have families that are grown up, maybe moved away, but it doesn't mean you can't start involving them now. So make sure that your family members are aware of your plan, your management plan and what's in it and what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then you want to start thinking about whether you're interested in permanent conservation. For some people, that's not right for them, but some people really are interested in that. So for example, a conservation easement would be an example of permanent conservation. So if you know if that's what you want, if you know you want to sell the development rights or get a conservation easement put on your property, you want to start sooner rather than later because some of those are a long and tiring process. So be thinking about that and looking into it if you are really sure that's what you want. And then you want to make sure that your forest management plan contains some estate planning. So our forest stewardship program does require that be included for a very good reason. If there's no plan and something happens, your years of forest management can be undone really very, very quickly. So for instance, I currently have a landowner who had a very unexpected health event. He was very healthy and his wife was panicking. She had no idea what went on. She didn't even know their forest was really managed beyond that her husband kind of worked out there. And she didn't know how to keep herself in all the programs that their land was enrolled in. I kind of helped her through that. So I had a copy of their management plan and I could help her with that. But make sure that that isn't your family. You want to keep them involved and informed, and most of them will be very happy that you did that. Thank you.
Okay, so I am Frank Servo. I am the Eastern District Service Forester for Connecticut Deep, and I cover the eastern counties of Connecticut, Tolland County, Windham County, and New London County. And I'm going to be building a little bit off of what Fern was just talking about, and talking about how to specifically talk to your forester about climate adaptations, right? And so to start off here, we're kind of assuming that you've reached a point where you already have an established relationship with the forester, and they're familiar with your land, they're familiar with you and your goals and objectives, and they have a really good understanding, and you've already begun to talk, and work with that forester on your property. From there, you want to make sure and just ask your forester and bring up the topic of climate change with your forester, because that's going to be a factor in something that's going to have a large impact on the conditions in your forest, and you want to make sure that it's not going to negatively impact the ability of your forest to reach your other goals and objectives. And it could be as simple as just having conversation and really learning that your forest is in a pretty good condition the way it is, or it's a lot of times preparing for climate change might mean affecting the timing of a planned practice, or perhaps changing the implementation in some way. So for example, you might have had in your management plan that you're going to be doing a thinning treatment in order to allow the trees in your forest to grow more vigorously, to have more growing space, and that might have been planned for sometime in the next 10 years. But you might say, in order to make sure that your forest really stays in a resilient condition with regards to climate change, you might want to do that sooner, right? It might sort of create more of a sense of urgency to get it done, so that you don't nothing happens over the course of that next 10 years. Or perhaps you might be thinking about changing the types of trees that you're going to be cutting down, or perhaps cutting fewer than you would have if you weren't thinking about climate change, or perhaps more than you would have if you weren't thinking about climate change. And then also there could be, it could involve really having to have a conversation where you're doing some prioritization, right? So you may, if you have a really sort of specific goal about aesthetics or a type of condition where you want your forest to be in, but that may really be at odds with the best condition for your forest's climate resiliency, then you may have to make that decision. You say, well, you know what, I understand that my property is going to be a little bit vulnerable to the negative impacts of climate change if we do this, but this action is really important to me and I still want to do it. Or you might sort of change what you do in order to make sure that you've got everything in place to be resilient to climate change. So anyway, it's just a matter of introducing that conversation, being open to potentially tweaking some of the management activities that you're going to do, and in weighing those options with the rest of your goals and objectives. And that's it. I'll mute myself now and move on.
Hi, my name is Christopher Ryley with Sweet Birch Consulting, and I want to make you landowners aware of the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS. This is the lead federal agency. It's within the U.S. Department of Agriculture that helps private landowners voluntarily conserve soil, water, and other natural resources on their land. This is an agency that has its roots in the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl era, helping farmers. But they've expanded and grown, and their programs now include forestry, and they do a lot of forestry work here in New England. Next slide, please. So what does NRCS do? Again, they work primarily on private lands, unlike the Forest Service or state agencies. They don't have their own land to manage and take care of. And they do this in two main ways. First of all, they'll provide professional technical assistance in providing foresters, wildlife biologists, or other specialists to help landowners take the best possible care of their land in the form of improved stewardship and sometimes permanently protecting it. And then they also provide significant financial assistance in the form of cost share funding to help landowners pay for the implementation of these measures, which might otherwise be hard for some landowners to pay for. They can typically cover about 75% of the cost of these practices, and it comes as reimbursement after implementing the practice on the ground. And again, just want to emphasize that all NRCS programs are voluntary. They're non-regulatory. Next slide, please. This is a menu that shows some of the most common NRCS forestry practices here in the Northeast. I think this might cover about 90% of the practices you'll see here in Southern New England. I've highlighted forest management plan preparation in red because that's an important one. It's the process of developing a blueprint or a strategic plan for your land over a 10-year period. Once that's approved by NRCS, there may be practices recommended in your plan to improve forest health, enhance wildlife habitat, or manage invasive species. Once you have the plan, you could apply for the funding to put these practices to work on the ground. And there's a long menu of different conservation practices that It will cover just about everything conservation-oriented landowners here in New England might want to do. Next slide, please. So if you're interested in taking advantage of these resources, NRCS is the largest single source of funding for landowners in the Northeast. I'd suggest that you start by contacting your state or local NRCS office. There's the web URL down at the bottom of the photo there. And there are several field offices in Connecticut and Massachusetts, one in Rhode Island. And there could be a bit of a learning curve to working with NRCS. Take some time and learning their system of doing things, but their conservation planners are eager to work with you, and it's well worth you're taking advantage of the opportunity for the assistance that NRCS is making available for private landowners. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Christopher. So we've talked again about some things you can look for on your land. We've just gone through some great resources that you can talk about with a forester. And now we're moving into the ACT section. So you can take an action or a set of actions that actually benefit wildlife, that benefit the health of your forest, and that might benefit climate resiliency on your land. So the last set of speakers is going to go through some of these resources that help you take action on your land.
Hi, Jeff Ward again from the Connecticut Ag Station. I think a lot of us have seen damage when there's too many deer in our vegetable gardens, or the famous mushroom trees that line many of our streets or backyards where there's too many deer. Shoot, they're supposed to come up separate. And the background again was just showing a forest which had 60 to 100 deer per square mile, and there's just no regeneration. And even in areas, not only is there no regeneration, but pretty much everything out there is invasive species like barberry or bittersweet. In our neck of the woods, you might have, why am I blanking out? You might have buckthorn or honeysuckle. But even if you have a forest harvest out there and the tree's trying to resprout, the photo is a little bit tough to see. But if you look at where the new sprouts are coming out of a stump, an area with too many deer, the deer just chew those sprouts down and keep chewing them year after year, and they can never develop into old trees. Thank you, who's ever doing the arrow there. It's probably Logan. Next slide, please. Well, here's another thing which we'll see sometimes. We'll just see a complete area which is just covered by fern as far as the eye can see. And in a healthy forest, you should have a really diverse and dense shrub layer out there. You should have wildflowers. You should have tree regenerations. Well, the cheapest solution is to go out there and you can do hunting. Next slide, please. But not everywhere is a place where you're allowed to hunt, and not everyone wants to have hunting on their land. So what are some alternatives to hunting that you can do to try to get the regeneration, the new trees to grow on your land? Next. Well, one thing you can do is to put up cages. If we've actually done a lot of work, with the solid tubes and the mesh tubes and wire cages. Well, if you've got individual trees, like here, there's some eastern red cedars, and you're trying to keep deer from chewing on them. Well, you can make a cage and just grow those trees until they're 6 feet high, where they're generally above deer browse, and they keep growing. With white pine, if you look on the lower right, when you plant white pines and they're from a nursery, deer can actually tell which ones are from a nursery and which ones are growing wild. They have a different taste, and they'll focus in on those trees that you planted out there. So you can put on one of these mesh tubes for a couple years until the deer get over top of them. And then in the bottom center, and if they're still chewing for a year or two, you can actually use a bud cap, which all you need to do is need some waterproof paper and a pair of pliers, and you can do 50 to 100 trees an hour really easy, just protecting that 1 main leader. If you look in the bottom right, it's actually an experiment we did, but some people around the country are using it. They make big cages 6 feet high and put around stump sprouts to keep the deer from chewing on the oaks as they're sprouting up. If you don't have a lot of oak in your land, it's one way to do it. Nice thing about those cages is once the oaks are 6 feet high, you can actually just take the cage off, move it to another stump sprout, and let that one just keep growing up. Next slide, please. Well, if you want to go, beyond protecting individual seedlings, you can start putting up deer exclosures. And these are some of the traditional ones. If you have really big money, and this is a nature preserve in the top left there, that's a wrought aluminum fence, 8 feet high with an automatic gate to get in that encloses, I can't remember if it's 40 or 80 acres. Well, most of us can't afford to put that around our land. So if you look in the bottom left, a more low cost effort is to get a bunch of pressure treated 4x4s, throw them in the ground, put up some plastic mesh netting. You need a wire on top, just keep small branches from damaging it. But that's susceptible to one thing, rabbits will start chewing through it. If you get, even a 2-inch diameter branch, it can rip through it and knock it down. So they do need maintenance. Not so much in this part of the world, but in Pennsylvania, they put up thousands of acres of every year of a woven wire fence. And that's what the picture to the right shows. Those are sturdier, they last long, but they cost about $4 a linear foot to put up. And over the lifetime, at least $1 or $2 a linear foot to maintain. We do get nor'easters, and when a big branch comes down, it can smash that fence. So after every big storm, you have to go out and walk along it. And then it's going to cost you $1 or $2 a linear foot to remove that linear fence, unless you want to leave that woven wire fence up in your woods for decades. Next slide, please. So one alternative we're looking into is to put up slash walls. And Mark, I'm going to have to apologize. I didn't have a chance to put in your slide because of the snowstorm. This is something that was started by Pete Smallage over at Cornell. And the idea is to use all the tops and other parts when we have a harvest job that are just left on the site. You just pile them up on the side of all the harvest area, and it makes a low-cost fence, about $2 a linear foot, that you can use to surround the property. There has been one put up in Rhode Island. I'll show you the map where we're all going in. But what's nice about a slash wall is if a tree falls on top of the slash wall, what happens? It just makes it stronger. And they put in over 13 of these for a couple hundred acres over in New York. And they found that the only wildlife that doesn't get into them inside of the slash wall are deer. Bear climb right over them. Rabbits like using the slash walls as habitats. Some of you might have put rabbitat, where you did a clear cut surrounded by brush piles. Well, this is just one long linear brush pile. So everybody in the world can get in except deer. Next slide, please. So hopefully by next summer, things get a little bit back to normal. Let's cross our fingers and really hope on that. We'll be able to take you out and show you some demonstration areas. Rifco over in Rhode Island is put in one. I can't remember the name of the town. Mark can probably type it into the chat box, which I believe that's open for the public to walk through, Mark? No? Oh, it's not. So you have to have a tour with Rifco with Mark Tremblay if you're over in Rhode Island. But here in Connecticut, we're planning on putting in 4 of them, 2 in Southern Connecticut and 2 in North Central. And we're working with Mass DCR to put one up on the Ware River watershed. So I think with that, next slide, I pass it on to my next comrade. There we go.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Tremblay. I'm a forester, consulting forester, and also the outreach coordinator with RIFCO, which is the Rhode Island Forest Conservators Organization. It's a nonprofit forest landowners association. We hosted that slash wall, but I'm here to talk about and raise your awareness about a program called Forestry for the Birds. There are programs in each of the 3 states, Southern New England states, and there's others around the country, New England particularly. And what I've got here on the screen is a picture of the desktop guide on the left and the little pocket guide on the right side of that picture of the manual, the guidebook that has been developed for the Rhode Island program, but there's similar publications for Mass and Connecticut. And basically, I just want to talk about how activities that you do on your property to increase the resiliency of your oak forest can also enhance habitat for a variety of wildlife, but in particular birds. And I saw by the poll that a lot of our participants here today are interested in bird populations. So the next slide, please. So the three programs, one is they have demonstration sites. I can speak in particular to Rhode Island's sites, but I know that there are others in the other states. The one here in Rhode Island is run by the Rhode Island Woodland Partnership through the RC&D Council. And our coordinator for that program is Kate Sales, who is on the call today. And perhaps Kate can post her contact information if people would like to contact her about the program and how the Southern New England Heritage Forest has got funding available to develop forestry plans with bird habitat in mind. And the MASS project is hosted by the Mass Wildlife Woodlands Institute and Mass Audubon and the Mass DCR. The URLs are up there. And Connecticut project is hosted by Audubon Connecticut, not to be confused with Connecticut Audubon, two different organizations, but Audubon Connecticut, and that URL is correct there, has their program along with the U.S. Forest Service in the Last Green Valley. And forgive me, I don't believe Connecticut Deep is involved, but perhaps they are with technical assistance through the foresters that work for them. So if anybody has any questions, you can go through the different URLs and talk to Kate and see if there's programs available that in your state that you'd be able to get involved with. Thank you. Next presenter.
Hi, everybody. My name's Chris Capone. I'm a service forester with Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. I just quickly want to go over some different sources for native tree seedlings and saplings. It's important to remember that we're lucky enough to live in an area of the country where we don't really need to plant. It's not necessary. Trees will seed in and grow naturally here without planting, but you can kind of help speed along the process and be more specific with which species you'd like to kind of see come back through planting. So just going to kind of run through these links real quick. The first one is for Connecticut tree sales. The next one down is Connecticut Conservation Districts. Below that, the ritree.org, that's a web link to the Rhode Island Tree Council. Below that is Bryden Nursery, and that's in Cranston, Rhode Island. And then Grow Native Mass is the next one. Next slide. So in Northern New England, the web links here, we have the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Nurseries. There's the New Hampshire State Tree Nursery, the Maine Tree Crop Alliance, and then the last one is the Arbor Day Foundation.
All right, thanks, Chris and all. I'm Andrea Urbano. I'm a service forester covering the central part of Connecticut, work for Connecticut Deep. So as we all likely know, climate change poses a substantial risk to southern New England forests. But these forests are also part of the climate solution. Forest management can not only facilitate resilience and adaptability to change, but also improve our region's ability to mitigate the effects of climate change. Foresters and landowners and managers alike are fortunate to have available to them the resources of the U.S. Forest Service's Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, or NIACS. NIACS has created a climate change response framework intended to make forest management decision-making easier for folks interested in managing in the face of change. These resources are intended to promote adaptive forests throughout our landscape. You can click, please, Logan. So what is an adaptive forest? Well, in my forest is one that is prepared for or can respond to climate change without compromising its health, function, and services. Our forests provide us a plethora of ecological, social, cultural, and economic services. What makes a forest adaptive or resilient? Let's look at A or B. In your opinion, which of these two forests would be more resilient to a disturbance or adaptive to change? We can talk about this more on Saturday, but I will just give you the answer is B. Why? Because there is greater species diversity and there's greater structural diversity. So the arrangement, spacing, and size of the trees comprising this forest is more diverse or complex in B than it is in A. And I'd just like to briefly draw your attention to the fact that the forest in A has at least 3, maybe more deer browsing that very open understory that lacks regeneration. Whereas in forest B, you may, if you have good enough eyes, only be able to see 1 deer there struggling to get through the dense herbaceous and woody understory you see there. So how can, please click the next slide. So how can you promote an adaptive forest in your woodlot or throughout the woods you manage? As Frank and Fern and others mentioned, you can talk to your service forester or your private forester to learn more about options specific to your woodlot. But here I describe 3 broad categories of management options adapted from NIAC by Tony D'Amato of UVM. So you can promote forest resistance through management options, which improves your woodlot's defenses against changes or disturbances. So it pretty much functions, or management options that promote resistance function to maintain current conditions. You can implement management prescriptions or options that promote resilience. And that means it promotes forest function so that it can return to a prior or a desired reference condition following either a human or natural disturbance. Or you can promote forest transition through management. And this facilitates change and encourages ecological adaptation to a new or changing condition. So an example of a management option that falls within the transition category might be conducting some facilitated migration. So you conduct a timber harvest, and then you pull from the great list of nurseries that was just provided, and you can select some adaptive species to plant and hopefully protect from herbivory. As we move through this spectrum of management options from resistance to transition, there is inherent uncertainty or more uncertainty in the management approaches. Next slide, please. Some basic strategies for promoting any one of those resistance, resilience, or transition within your woodlot can be as basic as controlling and monitoring the spread of your invasive species, harvesting overstory trees or timber where appropriate, maybe even doing a thinning of some understory trees if necessary, with some of those sub-bullets in mind, retaining some dead wood, both standing and down, planting trees if necessary, as we discussed, retaining valuable live trees, reducing herbivory, as Jeff spent time discussing, is key in southern New England forests. And as Fern discussed, having a plan for your land. You can delve into these menu options, they're called by NIAC, and strategies and approaches by visiting some of the links shared in the chat box and provided on these slides. I'm also happy to talk much more about these on the 6th. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much to all of our presenters. And thanks to everybody for keeping really great questions rolling in the chat window. Before you go, I want to make sure that you have a chance to tell us, what are you most interested in? So I just launched another poll, and we'd love to hear from you. Out of this menu of options, things that you can watch in your land, things you can talk about with a forester, and actions that you can take, what is most appealing to you? Wildlife-oriented actions, forestry-oriented actions, climate-friendly actions, or if you want to learn more. And once again, I've pasted it in the chat window, but I'll repaste it. This Saturday, February 6th at 9 a.m., hopefully it won't be snowing again, we have a Q&A session, and most of the presenters that are here today will be available, and actually a couple more too, will be available to answer your questions. So if you have questions about your land and about what's going on your property, then they'll be there to answer your questions, and other folks that are there can learn from each other too. Let's see, 70% of you have voted. The Q&A session, thank you, Lise, for your question. I will be there for an hour or more, depending on how long people have questions. And also, I should have mentioned, in addition to emailing out a copy of a PDF of these slides, a link to the recording, and a copy of the chat log with all of these links in it, we also are including the contact info for all of our presenters. So they would be happy to hear from you if you have follow-up questions for individuals or someone from your state that you would like to talk with. Let's see, it looks like 50 out of 64 people have voted. I am going to count down from 10 and we will almost wrap up. So 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bink. Okay, so thank you again for completing this poll. So of the folks that completed it, many are interested in wildlife-oriented actions. It's very helpful. So we can try to develop programming that gets at that. Forestry-oriented actions, yes, more than a third of you are interested in those. We can certainly follow up and develop more resources from this menu. And almost 1 in 5 are interested in climate-friendly actions. And some of you want to learn more. That's great too. We have lots of great information for increasing resiliency in Southern New England's oak forests. Thank you all so much for being a part of it. I invite you again to check out the chat window for lots of great links. Just a quick tip, you can actually save it yourself right now if you want to. If you look at the chat window in the bottom right corner, there's a little ... for more, and it should give you an option to save the chat. So you can save the chat as a text file to your computer. And again, we'll follow up with a recording of this presentation. And we will also follow up with a PDF of the slides and all these links, so you can look up all the information that you want. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and stay safe in the snow out there.